Not everyone in the biosphere has the same experience. When the ground began to shake, the soldier standing next to you grabbed your hand, and suddenly you find yourself seeing through his eyes and carrying his memories. He is looking at your female avatar body, but now you are inhabiting his body. And then out of nowhere, you suddenly remember being in the spirit world and being told that you are capable of playing more than one part at a time. And now you understand what it means to be a multi-dimensional being. And you realize you have been playing the part of a 17-year-old girl and a soldier simultaneously in this game lifetime. As you access your avatar's memories, you realize that you have no idea why you're in the biosphere. In fact, you had no idea that the biosphere even existed. From this new perspective, you have an instant awareness about yourself and your history and every thought that you've been thinking. As if you're in a moment out of time, you remember that you were named Dylan, after a famous singer whose first name was Bob. And you know you don't consider yourself to be much of a singer, and the idea of singing to the pyramid was the most ridiculous, unsoldierly thing you had ever heard of, let alone having to walk around with a stupid candle when you had a perfectly good flashlight in your room. Never before had you been ordered to wear army fatigues while being asked to leave your weapons and equipment in your locker. Your latest orders have taken you to the deepest level underground that you've ever been. There are hundreds of other soldiers milling about, and oddly enough, several people who look completely out of place, including 4 teenage girls, a prisoner, a male nurse, and an old man and middle-aged woman who appear to have escaped from the psych ward, based upon the green scrubs they wore and her pink fluffy slippers. All of you had ended up in some kind of expansive chamber with 30-foot ceilings, composed almost entirely of cement. There was a massive vault-like metal door at its far end, and fluorescent lights emanating an eerie, unnatural glow throughout. It feels as claustrophobic and lifeless as a mausoleum. Strangely enough, your commanding officer orders you to follow every instruction issued by a man called Thomas. You are quite sure your CO can't be serious when you see a man dressed in a white linen tunic, with a collar of precious and semi-precious stones set in a flexible gold mesh that extends 8 inches out from his neck and drapes slightly over his shoulders while covering his chest and upper back. You think the man looks like an ancient Egyptian priest who just walked off a movie set. And when you look at your commanding officer to see if this is a joke, you are met with a grave look that communicates he is serious. As candles are passed around, lit one from another, Thomas tells your group that you will be walking to a pyramid. He then orders you to fill in the gaps between the people and follow whatever the people are doing. As the vault-like door begins swinging slowly open, you immediately hear the sound of a towering waterfall crashing into a pool of water approximately 20 feet away. In single file, you all march over the threshold, and then you realize you are in a cave, which is completely hidden behind the waterfall. In moments, the rumbling sound is replaced by the light splash of water falling in small streams, glinting in what appears to be the soft, silvery glow of moonlight. As the streams become mere droplets, the water below drains so that only a light shimmer of water remains on the rock floor. As you step out beyond the mouth of the cave and up onto the land, you are shocked to see moonlight filtering down from overhead through an evergreen forest, wrapped in the delicate scent of pine. The air is fresh and filled with floral fragrances, and the sounds of whirring insects and the occasional croaking frog. You would have sworn you were outdoors, but you know that isn't possible. Even so, you feel incredibly alive. Maybe it's the air, you think, or maybe it's because you're no longer wearing your regulation jumpsuit. But that seems crazy. How could a jumpsuit change a person's feelings? Your commanding officer points you to separate pathways, allowing you to descend quickly down the hillside. At first, you can only see the forest and moonlight filtering down through the trees. And though you know you're heading toward a pyramid, you are not prepared for the size and scope of what you see. A large group of plainly dressed men, women, and children circle around the magnificent pyramid, and as you step into an empty spot next to a tall, beautiful young woman, she looks at you and smiles as she reaches out to hold your hand. Part of you hopes you will never have to go back to your post, and that you would be ordered to stay in this magical place forever. But you remind yourself that you are a soldier and snap your mind back into the present moment. As you begin to take in the sights and sounds around you, you realize that everyone is gazing up at this weird ball of light that is hovering just over the top of the pyramid, and they are all singing some weird sound. Yet as you stand there, tight-lipped, and waiting for whatever it is that is going on to be over, any magic you had seen in this place doesn't seem worth the embarrassment of being here at this time. But at least you have the comfort of knowing that you will soon be back at work and can forget the whole thing ever happened. But you never do make it back to work. You will never admit this to another soul, but as you gaze up toward the top of the pyramid, you see a ball of light that is growing larger and larger until it seems to explode into an intense sapphire blue-white light, and you are suddenly overwhelmed with a feeling of love beyond anything you have ever felt in your entire life. Nothing you've ever experienced compares to this feeling. Nothing. And in the next moment, you burst into tears and instantly fall to the ground. What happened? You struggle to get to your feet, but the entire ground beneath you is shaking violently. You look desperately around for a place to take cover, as huge chunks of the biosphere come crashing down from above. You try to take the young woman standing next to you along with you, and some of the other people as well, but they all seem to be in some kind of a trance. So you run into the pyramid entrance and are joined by just a few other soldiers when a gigantic block of cement crashes in front of the doorway. You aren't practiced in prayer, nor do you talk to God. You don't even believe in God. But as death is staring you in the face, you really have no one else to turn to. So you beg that your life be spared, and in that moment, the strangest thing happens. You hear a voice speaking directly into your mind saying, "No one will ever change your destiny against your will. All that you desire for yourself will be allowed." "Then I desire to walk out of here alive," you whisper, your eyes shut tight as you huddle next to a wall with your hands covering your head. "And in one piece," you add, wanting to be sure you cover all your bases. When the earthquake subsides, you and the soldiers cautiously climb over the rubble and discover that the biodome ceiling had fully collapsed. Everything is silent. Apparently, there are no survivors. You can see the edge of the earth a few miles above and blue sky beyond that. You stand and stare for a moment, unable to remember the last time you'd seen the sky. You feel lucky to be alive, but at the same time you wonder, what is it all for? As a soldier, you've seen plenty of death, and you've caused some of those deaths as well. But something has changed within you, and you begin to question the purpose of a life that will only end in death. And though all of the physical evidence points to the fact that everyone is dead and buried in the rubble, you keep seeing images of everyone alive and well. But surely that is just wishful thinking on your part. You and the other soldiers try to return to your barracks, but the cave with the waterfall has collapsed. The only way out is to climb up to the top of the biosphere. It is 20 miles to the nearest wall, and from there it is several miles high. Though you don't have proper climbing equipment, you are able to salvage ropes and other things you need by picking through the rubble at some of the homesteads. Clearly, everyone had perished at the base of the pyramid because you don't see a single person dead or alive. Yet in contrast, there is so much life everywhere. Birds are singing high in the trees, and all kinds of animals, large and small, appear around you, and they bear neither fear nor aggression. You are secretly relieved that all of you had been ordered to leave your weapons behind. You wouldn't have said anything, but you would have felt awful if the others had killed these beautiful, harmless creatures for food. Life reemerges so quickly, you are amazed to witness the way that nature continues unperturbed, as if nothing had happened and all is well. Water moves gracefully around the new obstructions, departing from old stream beds and creating new ones. But the underground source still provides an abundance of the most delicious, invigorating water you have ever experienced. And combined with the fresh air and eating the most delectable raw fruits, nuts, and vegetables each day, you feel more alive and energized than ever before in your life. Once you all have what you need for climbing, it takes you several more days to reach the desert floor. Yet when you finally arrive, you feel a tug in your heart as you look down. You will miss this woodland world, but you are a trained soldier, and you have the responsibility of reporting to a new commanding officer as soon as possible. Yours, it seems, has perished in the earthquake. After discovering that the surface entrance to the military facility has collapsed, your small group hikes out to a road looking for water and food. Here and there, you manage to find enough to keep you going by digging in a garbage can at a deserted campsite or finding a water pump that is still functioning. As time goes on, you meet a few more soldiers who also seem to have been cut adrift, and somehow their circumstances had separated every single one of them from their weapons. Even so, as a band of trained soldiers, you are prepared for hand-to-hand combat. But there really isn't much to fight for. Everywhere you go, houses have collapsed, and people have left the towns. The only things alive seem to be the occasional stray dog or cat, but you and the others have no trouble surviving. You rummage through a rubble of collapsed homes and restaurants and raid pantries for food. You find plenty of canned goods that you share with each other. Ultimately, you find all kinds of necessities: flashlights, batteries, even maps of the country. But due to the state of the roads after the earthquake, you have no transportation, and you are in a small desert town, miles and miles from any other town. Your solution is to hike out with food and water, store it, and hike back. In this way, you all stockpile your resources until everything is in place, and then set out again, going farther and farther each time, ultimately coming to another vacant town and starting over again. It is slow going, hiking back and forth with supplies. You begin to lose track of time, but soon winter is upon you, and there is nothing to do but wait it out until spring. When you all begin your slow process again, you come to a town where frightened-looking men and women peer out from behind stone walls or boarded-up windows with a shotgun aimed straight at you. Having a gun is a tempting thought, but you all discover that if you keep walking, no one bothers you, so you decide to wait. And sure enough, one day you come across a shotgun and ammunition in a deserted barn. You all have rabbit for dinner that night, and because there is more ammunition than you can carry, you take turns shooting bottles and cans off of fence posts. It is the most fun any of you have had in over a year since your journey began. The next morning you start your trek once again. You are headed for Denver, but no one knows how long that will take. And then, like another miracle, you see a barn, and grazing in a pasture nearby is a horse, a sturdy-looking little palomino with a shaggy white mane and long tail. The little mare doesn't look like much, but somehow she's been well cared for, and she is plump from eating the lush grass of early summer. As you walk toward the pasture, a boy comes out of the house and onto the porch. He is obviously surprised to see all of you because he yells in a panicky voice, "Papa!" But when the boy turns to go inside, the soldier carrying the shotgun readies the weapon and yells,
"Stop or I'll shoot!"
The boy freezes in his tracks. The soldier yells more gently,
"We don't want to hurt you, kid. We just need your horse."
Without any fear at all, the boy screams, "No, no, she's mine, you can't have her!" But as he realizes there is nothing he can do, he withers onto the porch in tears, crying out, "She's all I have left." You are the one soldier who had a horse growing up. You feel for the boy, as you now realize the child has no father. But you really do need a horse to haul food and water if you are ever going to make it over the mountains and down the other side to Denver. And of course, what you are all doing is for the greater good. So you grab the halter and lead rope and walk quietly up to the horse, holding out your hand coaxingly. The mare looks at you inquisitively, but doesn't move away when you reach out and stroke her neck, and gently loop the lead rope around her neck and put the halter on. In the barn, her tack isn't in very good shape, but the saddle will only be used to strap on bags of food and canteens of water. As you lead the horse along the road behind the other soldiers, the land seems to be bursting with the magic of summer. Flowers bloom alongside the road in a way you'd never noticed before. They obviously weren't planted, and they seem to have a carefree feeling to them, as if they enjoy growing wherever they please. Finally, you all camp out for the night. You all have rabbit again for dinner, and it is such a delicious treat after months of canned food. You walk with the little palomino as she grazes on the long grass growing intermittently in the forest. You don't dare allow her to graze by herself, since you are still close enough that she might gallop back home. But after a day of walking, and now to stand and wait for the horse to eat, you decide you are just too tired. So you jump on her back while holding the lead rope that is connected to the halter. The mare doesn't seem to mind and continues grazing. Reminded of your childhood days and your own horse, you lean back and stretch out on the horse's rump, looking up at the clouds tinged with pink in the early evening sky.
I think I'll call you Dusty Rose,
you say.
I know you're a Palomino,
you add with a note of apology.
but Dusty Rose was my horse growing up, and she was a fine horse, so it really is a compliment,
you add, stroking her side as you enjoy the warm, horsey smell of her. As you lay on the mare, her rump for a pillow, you are reminded of a day in your childhood growing up in Kentucky, where you'd done exactly the same thing with your own horse. The sky had been so very blue and polka-dotted with puffy little clouds. There was no breeze, and the clouds barely moved, but you played a game where you saw dragons or fairies or monsters in the clouds, and then enjoyed watching them transform into something new. You were in a beautiful hidden place that you'd discovered all on your own. And right in the middle of a cornfield, the land suddenly dips down into a little pond with the occasional red-winged blackbird swaying on a reed rising sturdily from the water. To one side of the forest, and as you rode slowly down to the water, you saw a mother fox emerge from the cover of the trees with her kids, and after they left, a mother skunk appeared with her young clan, tails high in the air like striped banners, proudly marching to the pond. There were baby cottontail rabbits, too, but they were just here and there without a mother, and you were relieved that the red-tailed hawk, flying lazy circles in the sky above you, seemed to take no notice. But then again, there was plenty of cover between the reeds and the undergrowth and the tall forest trees. As the twilight sky begins to darken, there is a moment when Dusty Rose suddenly jerks her head up and looks quickly to one side, pulling you out of your childhood reverie. You think she is about to bolt, so you jump off and hang onto the lead rope while giving her a quick yank to get her attention. You are tired, and it's time to sleep. So you lead the mare to a tree near your camp and tie her up for the night. A few times during the night, you sit up out of a deep sleep, your heart pounding. But each time, you can still make out Dusty Rose standing by the tree. You can tell the night sounds are making her antsy as well, yet you know how to tie a solid knot, and that gives you the confidence to go back to sleep each time. But then something wakes you. It isn't a frightening sound, it's more of a low, soft stirring in the air. Your eyes gently open, the moon has set, and the sky is just a bit lighter than the dark of night, so you know the dawn is approaching. You hear a twig snap. None of the men stir, and you tell yourself you aren't going to sit up this time, and that Dusty Rose is still tied to the tree. So you lay there for a moment, just listening, but then you hear the soft sound of a horse walking quietly away. You leap to your feet and take off in the direction of the horse's hoofbeats, but her walk turns into a trot, and though you can hear her trotting away, you can't see her in the dark grayness of the early morning. On and on you run. It isn't hard because the mare is following a forest path that had been created by other animals, deer perhaps. You realize you've never been in better shape in your entire life. You aren't breathless, and though you haven't caught up with the mare, you can still hear her enticingly just ahead of you, slowing for a moment to grab a mouthful of grass, and then trotting on, as if she knows you're still following her. Gradually it becomes lighter. You've been running for miles, but finally, just ahead in a clearing, you see her. Like a round little golden Buddha surrounded by a sea of the greenest, most lush grass you've ever seen that ripples in the early morning breeze. Dusty Rose doesn't even look in your direction as she flicks her long white tail in the early morning sunshine. You stop to catch your breath as you admire the scene, and then a familiar sound rings out through the woods, and the next thing you know, you've been knocked flat on your back, sensing warm blood oozing from the buckshot holes, spreading out across your shoulder and onto your chest. You don't know who shot you. You guess it must have been the boy as you sit up and try to see for sure. But this action only makes your blood gush more quickly. And no matter what you do or don't do, you know you'll be dying alone. No one knows you left the camp to run after the horse, and you've run for several miles. Even if the other soldiers heard the shot and started running, you know you will die before they can reach you. As you lay on your back, watching shafts of sunlight angling through the aspen leaves as they sparkle a soft light green above you, and as you listen to the faint breeze rustling through the trees while songbirds trill in the air above, you suddenly remember how much you had loved the forest in your childhood. You loved growing up on a little Kentucky farm with a stream out back and a swimming hole where you and your friends used to climb an immense oak tree and swing out over the hole, dropping in with a huge splash. Your family had chickens, 2 milking cows, a few goats, and even a llama which your mother brushed daily to collect its hair. She then spun the wool, which she knitted into sweaters and wove into blankets. As you bask in the joy of reflecting upon these memories of your boyhood, as much as you loved all of them, the ultimate love of your life was your horse. You fed her every day, except for in the summertime when the grass was long and lush. And even now, you can remember the warm smell of the hayloft and the light coming down in shafts through holes in the roof. You always loved sweeping out the loft prior to getting a new load of hay, because you'd end up with a huge pile of loose hay below. You and your friends spent many happy hours jumping out of that loft and into the hay, and then climbing back up the ladder. You'd sit in your mare's cement feed bin on top of her hay, and she would nibble around you as you scratched her ears and spoke softly to her of what a wonderful friend she was to you. But the most fun you had was just riding through the fields and jumping over anything that got in your way. You'd typically end up at the quarry where you and Dusty Rose would swim in the warm water together. Quarry water was completely different than river water, which was often cold and polluted. The rock walls kept the water in one place where it spent the summer being warmed by the sun, and because there was no pollution, you could see right down to the very bottom, which had to have been 8 feet below. Swimming with your horse was one of the most cherished memories in your entire young life. You had to hang on to her mane because you were riding bareback, so your body would float up to the top of the water as her body undulated below the surface. And then, as she stepped back onto land, you had to hang on tight as her body suddenly rose up beneath you. Nothing in your entire life had ever compared to all your days in nature, riding your horse and playing with your friends. How had you managed to forget something you loved so dearly? Ever since the biosphere collapsed, you've spent all of your time in nature, first in the biosphere, then the desert, and most recently in the forest. But never, not once, did you simply relax and enjoy the peace and splendor of being surrounded by this completely natural world. No one would mourn the loss of you, and no one would be there in time to save you, if they even found you. For all you know, your body will just rot where it lays in the dirt. And then you wonder something you'd wondered a year earlier, when everyone was buried at the base of the pyramid. What was it all for?